Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shakespeare and Company for the first event of our first ever Photobook Week. It's been a great pleasure developing this project in collaboration with Photo Saint Germain and Too Many Pictures, as well as the 11 independent presses whose work we're delighted to be showcasing over the next 4 or 5 days. Tonight, we're very pleased to welcome Anne Golaz to discuss her new work, Corbeau, a book that beautifully blends text and images to depict the cycle of life in a rural Swiss village, recently published by Mack. And who better to lead the discussion about Anne's work than publisher Michael Mack himself, whose stunning list of photo books is one of those that we're showcasing over Photobook Week. After the discussion, you'll get the chance to ask both Anne and Michael questions, and then please do stick around for a glass of wine with us and get your copy of Corbeau signed by Anne, of course, and to peruse the rest of our Photobook Week display, which you'll find on these 2 benches here. But without further ado, please do join me in welcoming Michael Mack and Anne Golaz to Shakespeare and Company.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. It's an enormous honour to be in this bookshop of such great book history. Thank you very much to Sylvia and David, to Adam and Mathieu, and for all of you for joining us this evening. I thought I'd start just actually by talking a little bit about why, as the publisher of the book, I was attracted to it in the first place. We receive, as all publishers do, a huge number of submissions, and they vary, really. They vary in their sophistication, they vary in their level and their ambition. And I just mentioned to Anne a few moments ago that if we were to hold up the physical object that she submitted to us, it would not look that different to this book externally. And yet, in the detail, a lot of changes were made, but the point I'm trying to make is that certain elements, such as the cover design and the division into 3 chapters, and certain real fundamental elements of collage, the relationship of text to image, the introduction of drawings, were set and determined by Anne. This is very much an author's book, and we as a publishing house work very closely with our authors to create a space and an atmosphere in which they can collaborate with us, and we bring to the conversation, so to speak, the practical implications of working with a publishing house and making a press and making a long run. And those implications tend to be pragmatic in large part. But the extraordinary thing about this book was the fact that it was so well constructed. It was conceptually ambitious as a story which is largely it's mundane in the sense that it's a story that we all live through. The notion that we pass through time, we become orphans, and our relationship to our own history is one that's very specific to us, and yet it is universal. And this plumbs those epic stories, those epic themes, and yet tells it in a very specific narrative and arc, a personal story. At the same time, it uses this notion of collage by bringing together these elements, as I've mentioned, of drawings, of text, of photographs, video stills, and it passes into fiction almost, in the way that all great artworks do. It's not actually documentary, it's not a piece of social documentary, it is a piece of fiction. But perhaps a good place to start, and is for you to tell us a little bit about the history of the project, why it is you took the challenge of going back to your home and making the project you did.
Yeah, actually, I think that there's two starts for this project. In a way, there was some sort of unconscious start at the very beginning. So if I think of the real beginning of it, I didn't know that I was actually working on it, if I could put it that way, because I started to take photos. So it's really like the place where I grew up, the place where I'm from, but then I left that place, and I kind of I think I wouldn't have been able to do this body of work without living it, or living this world. And so one start was when I actually studied photography more than 12 years ago, about 13 years ago, and I started to take photos in that place just to practice photography and like try out different things. And never I would imagine that this would become a book. I did not even know what was actually really a photo book at that time. Then I kind of realized when I started to do the first images that there was a sort of a substance that I could put in my images that was somehow that has a sort of intensity because of my connection to this world or to this place, to the people of like belonging to this place. And little by little I started to realize that this substance was something important in what I could put in my artwork, and something that could bring it, let's say, further away. And then I did a lot of other stuff, and I left to Finland to do my master degree. And then when I was in Finland, where I still live now, very far in the north, then I started to miss that place, I think, or I started to like all the people who have been somehow. I started to see the place where I was coming from differently, because I left it. And then I came, each time I would come back in Switzerland, I would just go there and take photos. And it was not really like I was not really willing to build a work or not even a book. I was just willing to go there and take photos, and then later on I really consciously worked on the sort of kind of conceptualization of the whole story, and I started to use also what I have learned meanwhile, and I started to work on the book and think that okay, this could find its place. But the book form was really the first, let's say, kind of how do you call it, like the first
Capsule,
shape, or like in a way for that work, really. And it was very important to me to work with that form.
That's interesting, because I think a lot of photo books and art books in general suffer from the fact that they are projects in which the photographer sets out to make a series of images where they repeat almost by rote some formula in approaching a particular subject to tell a story which is then reproduced into a book. But Michael Schmidt, the German photographer and artist, is a really good example of somebody who works in exactly the vein that you're talking, where he would make an archive, a massive archive of work, and then he would return to the archive 4-5 years after he'd made it, and only then decide actually the story he was going to tell. Only then would he elaborate the connections and make the runs of image sequences, etc.
But I think that in a way it's I could never. In the very beginning of that project, I also knew so little about photography, and I could never. I would not even have the material or like the content of the story, because it's telling, the whole story is also telling about time passing, and it's something really important that is somehow the story needed time to pass, to kind of to get its like depth in a way,
and also for you to start understanding your relationship to your father. Perhaps you should talk a little bit more about what the book is about, the specifics of that, because that's perhaps not clear to some of the audience.
All the images were done in one place, which is very close to that farm where I grew up. And the character, I like to talk about characters because, as you said, somehow it also almost becomes a work of, I would not use the word fiction, but some sort of, there is a gap between what it is and what we experience there. But they are my family, and I photographed a lot my brother. And in the beginning, when I started to photograph him, it was just to hang around basically, or like kind of try out things with him. It was easy, and he was always there. In a way, it was a place that you would go there, he was always there. It was just like that. It was, and also then I started to have this.
But that was a particular reason. Sorry, perhaps you explain that, because he took over the running of the farm.
Yeah.
and the story is very much about the passing of the farm out of your family's history.
Yeah, and also these 12 years about that this book contains are the moment that the transition between the father's time and my brother or his, and then what happens at the very end of the book, actually almost when we published it, is that my brother stopped the whole thing, which I did not know. For instance, in the dummy, when you were talking about the dummy version, this end was much more like or open in a way, and there was actually we still kept like several ending in a way possible. It's not that concrete to say, okay, this is going to end like that. But the idea that, strangely, the end, you could have imagined that it's my father is quite old, but he's not dead. There's like also a bit of ambiguity in the book that maybe the viewer would think that is he actually dead or not, and then you could imagine that the story would end by somehow the father dying, but it ends by like in a way the brother kind of giving it up. And that I did not really know, and in a way it was also, I think it's quite important for the whole story, but it's not like extremely clearly brought up in a way, and it has this open,
So let's talk a little bit about the process, because as I said, for me it was an extraordinarily sophisticated maquette that you sent, however much it might have changed to the final version. What was the process? Because you worked with designers in...
No.
No. So
No.
Who are the people credited in?
They were not really they were not really designers, but it was actually, there was like the whole sequence and the editing of because I kind of found myself with a huge amount of images and different types of material, and I would just it was quite solitary work to do, at least for the editing, and then trying to sequence the whole thing. That's also one reason why I then built 3 different chapters. Maybe we just come back to that at the end, but a bit later. And so that was quite solitary, and I did it when I was in Lapland, where I live, kind of really far away from that place and from all kind of collaboration. And then I brought it back to Switzerland, to this village where the story is from, and there lives a bunch of friends in... how to explain it shortly, on the same site that in this house is where the farm is actually, and they are like doing a lot of collaboration with artists, and they have a sort of silk screen and old press process thing, so they do a lot of very kind of not really, it's not really artwork in the sense that they work more with artists, but they have a very nice spontaneous way to create things that I really liked, and they are also, these people are also part of the story as characters in a way.
Indeed, they're in the pictures,
yeah. And then so I went there and I said, well, let's make a book dummy with that, and but we did it in a week. It was extremely fast, like that dummy that you mentioned. It was very, very fast process, and it was not that I wanted it to be fast, but I had quite short time, and also I thought that we'll just do it the way we just liked it, and then it has a sort of I think quite authentic, we could say that it's kind of authentic touch in a way, maybe because somehow it was everything comes in a way from the same place. It's also, and that was not really something that I wanted to build like that, but it happened like that. And then it was almost too much. I think that it was almost too much work talking about one place and made by people belonging to the same place. So it also needed to have some other people somehow bringing an input, as you did.
But it's interesting that having taken it apart, it went back into a shape which is not dissimilar to the original. But so talk about the 3 chapters and the titles of those 3 chapters.
Yeah, so then the 3 chapters were also just a way to kind of sequence the whole story, because it has about 200 pages. It's not that much, but it's quite a lot, and it's quite dense.
It is for a photography book.
Yeah.
It's quite extensive. Yeah.
And so then I thought that how to make it. I mean, how to build the story, and how to start and how to end, and the structure with 3 chapters were the way to do that. So the first chapter is called Le Travail, which means work, but which also referred to a sort of a funny machine that they used to cut the cow's nails, or what is it called? Yeah.
Whose?
Yeah, thanks. And then, so that chapter called Le Travail is the first chapter, and it somehow sets the characters a little bit, and then the second chapter is called the Nebula, and there happens some sort of feeling of shift, or some sort of maybe, and it also gives a hint of the idea of destiny that may be written somewhere in the stars. There's a connection with the that's also why we chose the sort of star pattern, a little bit related in the inside. There's the idea that there's something written or not in the stars in a way, and then and then the third chapter is called The Other Side, which in French is L'autre côté, and that was of course a sort of metaphor for the life after death in a way, but also it's actually talking about the house on the other side of the main house there on the farm that we used to call L'autre côté, to say that there was one side and another. So and the family would live on one side or another, and then some people would kind of come on one side and then leave this side, and life was either on one side or on another. It's quite complicated to explain, but it's a little bit this double meaning that I was trying to play with the title of the different chapters.
And then just to because we'll come to text in a moment, but starting with the kind of most fundamental, the first piece of text, the title, where does that come from, and what's kind of the basis of that as the overweening structure for the whole book?
Yeah, so Corbeau means it means the raven and crow, but the way it's kind of we also decided actually together to keep it in French and to keep it just Corbeau and nothing else. It somehow appears a bit like a name for a person in a way, like it would be Anne so I like the idea that there would be some sort of character or storyteller, or because the image of crow is never, you cannot actually find any crow in this book, not even really the raven as a directly represented theme is invisible in a way.
Yeah.
And but it's to place it as a title also gives quite an importance to the meaning of it, and I wanted it to work as a sort of enigma in a way. That's something that has some symbolical meaning, but is not really expressed directly. So one of them was what we say that the raven is the bird of destiny, and that was quite a strong somehow symbol to me that I wanted to work a bit with. And then also the idea that it's a sort of a mediator between different worlds, and so in that case the rural and the urban, and then present and the past, and life, I mean the world of the living ones and the world of dead, I mean the
living and dead, yeah.
And
the Edgar Allan Poe reference, that was an influence, wasn't it?
And that also came together, but it's because it's kind of difficult to explain how how somehow this title made its way. There's like many different facets, and so I cannot really trace I would need kind of a day to talk about how this title came there as a sort of end word, but because there's so many symbols and so many aspects are actually related to the story, and but the Edgar Allan Poe poem called The Raven was of course some sort of confirmation that I wanted to use it, because it's it's more telling about a love story gone, or which suppose that's more related to a love story, but the poet is there, and every question that he asked to the bird always answer nevermore. And then I thought that was exactly what I kind of wanted also to suggest in this work, that more than with photography, we always refer to what has been, this society with the Barthes and so on. But to me, it was more than what has been. It was what would never be anymore. And that was very somehow important to what I wanted to say. So this sort of longing for a past. But maybe I can ask you also do you see that work as a sort of a nostalgic work in that sense, to this connection of
I think literally in the sense that nostalgia is about homesickness and returning to a place of memory and reference to home, yes, but actually it's not in any way, shape or form sentimental. And it does reach for it's not entirely just subsumed by the personal story. You manage to kind of spread it into a much wider range of emotional register and reference. And I think that largely comes through the balance with the text, interestingly, and the drawings. But we'll come on to the drawings. But the text, the history of the text is a significant thing, because the version that I saw was one thing originally, and then you came to me, and as a publisher, when an author comes with this hugely ambitious idea, which was, I want to work with a dramatist, and I want to basically effectively write a play from the transcripts of the conversations to thread this through the book. And I wouldn't say alarmed, but I was thinking, gosh, that's ambitious, and will it work? So perhaps you can tell us a little about that, because I think it's one of the fundamental parts now of the project.
And actually it's also all this text, I think it took about 2 years between the moment we met and...
Was it that long?
I think it was actually a bit less than 2 years, because I did the dummy in fall 2015 for the Paris Photo 2 years ago, and we didn't meet at Paris Photo, but we met in spring 2000, so it's about a bit less than 2 years. But this time I made some new images that I did in the book, and I still actually did some other images last weekend, so maybe this but it was more video works, and it's just to say that it's never really ending process. But those 2 years between the dummy and the final book were mostly I work mostly on the text part. And this, when I think that photography is not always enough in a way, and that was the reason why I wanted to work with text. And there was certain things that I could not find a way to express with photographs. It was just impossible. There was certain aspect of the story, or certain connection between the people, or certain connection to the place, or like what I just said about this house that we used to call the other side. And it was impossible to express that with an image, at least for me. There were certain things, and I nevertheless thought that there is a lot to say that I kind of wanted to try out. And then
but it's a big distinction between having a caption which tells you the specifics of relating the detail of an image to what you've done. It's a very different...
I will come to the way that we did the text, but then I worked with Antoine Jacou, who is a Swiss author, and he works a lot for cinema as a screenwriter, and for theater as a playwright, which means that he actually at first writes for characters to embody
dialogue,
dialogues, but not when working for cinema. It's true, it's dialogue, but if he he writes to somehow gives existence to characters, really, which is different than a critique or somebody who would and then he has also a very minimalist and I would say poetical way to write that I really kind of liked. And then so I met with him 2 years ago, and we agreed that we're going to do something together, but frankly we did not really know what it would become. And the whole process, we sort of we developed the collaboration within these 2 years, and at the end we actually mixed our writings. And when I went to meet him the first time, I didn't say, yeah, let's write something together. It was not at all like that. It was, I kind of invited him into my world, and I told him, let's see how far you can go and what we can develop. And then as the texts are somehow built the same way the images, in the sense that there's a lot of different types of text, and a lot of maybe not different types of text, but the reference or where the text come from. There's a lot of different references through kind of some of them are direct memories, but some of them are almost fiction. Some of them are like transcript of conversations. Some of them are like sort of like stage scenes that like a sort of a script for a filmed scene that never happened. And then some of them are just like direct conversation. And
this is one of my favorites. This is a good example of how the kind of the extraordinary kind of array of combinations through the book. It is unusual for a photo book in the sense of its shifts and movements, without the kind of the overplay of design, which I think is fundamental nowadays. Too many of these books have design elements which tend to cloud the content, and they're more to kind of substantiate a lack of content. This is a perfect example. I'll read a few lines of this actually, because this would be one of my favorite kind of fundamental spreads in the whole project. And this is a dialogue which is presented as being between you and...
Yeah, but we actually don't really know, because the image on the left side is showing the main character, my brother, and my sister. So there's also a bit of an ambiguity that you would maybe imagine that they are actually
having the conversation
when the text is indeed between me and my brother. Yeah.
How can you send a cow like that off to be butchered? You take it to the market in Croy, and that's it. But that one, for example. We're not going to put her in an old people's home either, are we? When that cow has to be sent off, how do you go about it? What? But when you have to send a cow like that off to the slaughterhouse, how do you go about it? Go about what? Because you're attached to it. Yeah, but that's life. Anyway, cows always manage to piss you off one way or another before you have to sell them. What do you mean? They become a pain in the neck, and in the end you're happy to get rid of them. Everyone you're really close to, like that one has a baby over there. He points to a calf out of frame, the little one. It never upsets you when you have to send them away? You used to have one you loved called Musso, didn't you? Well, yes, I've had lots I've loved. It never gets you down? No. Are you done? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really tells very sincerely also the relationship with that I have with my brother. And I think it kind of sweats really through the text a lot, because even like 2 days ago when I was trying to shoot videos, it was exactly like that. It's like, okay, so you're done, and what are you doing? Then yeah, there's something a little bit like kind of touching and funny at the same time, and that's an example of text that is very straightforward, because I was actually filming him when we had this conversation, and then we rewrote the text, and Antoine Jacques, we did that rewriting a lot. And then there are other texts that are more like subtle in the way that they connect with where they are coming from somehow. Like there's even actually a description of a photo, a text that is written from a photo that then we took out of the sequence. But you cannot really know that if you just read the text. It's a story. You cannot understand that it's actually describing a photo that then we. And some other are quite poetical. Maybe I can read the next one. And some of them are more poetical, and some of them also they work in echo, or how do you say that? Echo together. That there's sometimes this voice of the narrator that you don't really know who is speaking, and then there's a second voice that is talking with the I, like I remember, much more personal voice, and those two different type of texts are sometimes talking about the same thing or approaching the same themes. So we also worked with this idea of having different perceptions sometimes of like the photographs also actually do the same. They sometimes come back to the same things, but from different perception through time. So this one is called Growing, Falling. When a child is born, they plant a fruit tree, thinking they will grow up together at the same time. When the grandfather dies, it's a conifer. They call that a black pine. Others are added when the father's mother follows her husband to the grave. The trees create shade, protect the house, and close it in like a fence. They are also great for spying on the pastor's wife from above. One day, the trees are felled, perhaps because they take up too much space, or perhaps for no reason at all. A whim, a bad mood, something like that. And yeah, so it's there just to show, because it's also...
I think that's a good moment actually, just to open it out to you to see whether anybody has any questions, because I think we could keep talking for quite a lot longer, but it'd be great to hear if any of you have any kind of questions or ideas, or I'm not sure if anybody has actually seen the book yet or spent any time with it, which I think would help you.
Que la photographie ne te suffisait plus, et est-ce que tu as envie de toucher à d'autres disciplines en plus du dessin? Tu disais que tu faisais de la vidéo. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres choses?
Yeah, so I answer in English, just ask if I was saying that photography is not enough, and how do I want to develop this different disciplines or different artistic fields. But I think that this book really opened many doors in terms of my way of just creating things, and I mean the combination of drawings and text, and we made photographs and then video still is in that case, but the videos also exist. It's something that I haven't done before, and I could do it because I think in that project, because it's so much somehow I mean, I'm so much from there that I could open it to a lot of different techniques, and I could try, yeah. And I don't know if I could do it, for instance, with a body of work made. It would be interesting to see, but if I would do a body of work in all around the world, would I also open it that much in terms of different pieces that come together? I'm not sure, but I know that it was possible to somehow take the chance to experiment that in this context, because I could take the freedom, and it was difficult to somehow get lost in a way. I don't know how to explain that, but it was difficult to make mistake, because I would know so much what. It's a bit strange to say like that, but yeah.
Est-ce que tu as l'impression maintenant que le livre est fait, est-ce que tu as l'impression d'avoir perdu une forme d'innocence, ou ça te donne envie de développer encore?
Not really, because the funny thing is actually I've done some other books before, and that one is more, if you're using the word innocence, like is more authentic, or has more this sort of straightforward aspect than the previous ones, and it's so I don't know if I don't think that on the other hand, I think I got trust in trying different things also with the like writing. I love text, and I think it's something that I would not have simply perhaps the courage also to work with without this context and this set of people around me. Because another thing also with this project is that I was quite well surrounded, to be frank. I mean, not only with the publisher team, but also like on this collaboration with the text, and at first with the dummy when I was working with those friends. So all those people who came, who brought something, and they also gave me space to do what I wanted, but they gave me trust much more at first. So like confidence and then trust to do that. And that's something that it happened, and that no one can really take it away. And so what I learned in terms of artistic language, to put different things together, is something that I can use again. And I will never use it the same, but I can think of, okay, that's okay to actually put a drawing, even if I'm not like a crazy, I'm not excellent in terms of drawing, but it can work if it's useful for the content and the whole thing that we want to. And most probably would never have been able to do that before. And now I would like to work also with a little bit towards theater, but I will see. I don't know yet exactly where this project is how it's going to transform as well. But there's I
think for me one of the great revelations was the drawings.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting that they are tied in a sense to the photography in a way that the text is.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you talk about some of the texts being actually an extended caption about an image,
mm-hmm.
and quite a few of the drawings are drawings of photographs taken from that, and yet they're this echo again you refer to of the image and the site and the place and the particular moment,
mm-hmm.
but it's in this different language.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure again how you can actually straightforward see that this connection between the. Do you think that if you don't, I don't know, I mean maybe they have to tell us how this connection between the photographs and the drawings is really like obvious or not, or it's like, because you know the process, you know that, but. Because even I remember when I was talking with Louis, the graphic designer, one drawing, I was saying, I did use the last one I brought, and he could not make the connection with the photos. And I was like, wow, for me it was really obvious. And then I realized that maybe it's not, maybe I don't...
It doesn't have to just be about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's true that some drawings are kind of details or sort of made from the photographs, and some of them are actually existing in photos because like that one drawing that still has this paint wet, it's more a photo of a drawing than a drawing actually at the end also. So that's like you can show it, it's a nice one. You can just if I remember where it is. Yeah, that one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Kind of carrying on from what you're on about. It sounds as if hello. Yeah, you talk about how that it kind of sounds how that you kind of become frustrated with the medium of photography and how it can't quite tangibly tell the story of this place that you grew up. You kind of are so connected to it that photography isn't enough. Is that what you kind of? Is that why you explored the writing and the drawing?
Sorry, where are you? Oh. Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe it was not that clear the way I tried to explain it, but I had just the feeling that there was a lot to say, and certain things I could not find a way to tell them with the images, and then somehow I also started to miss a voice, or kind of to miss the. I mean, I did not want those characters. I wanted those characters to exist through their words and through stories, not only in a visual on a visual level. Photography sometimes is also extremely silent and extremely frozen in one precise moment, and that was sometimes not enough. But I'm not saying that photography is not enough in itself. It was, of course, it's it's a medium that has immense depth. But for me, there was stories that, and actually, when I started to work with the text, I also realized that the power of text, or its I don't know how to say that in English, but son pouvoir de divulgation, or the possibility that the text could actually open on certain things, it was very different than an image. I've always thought that a photograph is actually showing a lot, but text is telling. To me, I realized that the texts were telling a way much more than the images, in a way, or not that they are telling more, but they were. The images are open always to interpretation, and you can mirror your own story, and you can. It's and the texts were suddenly very kind of.
And I think what you managed to do in the book is create quite an elaborate time chamber, if you like, of duration, where because there's no clear chronology and it moves back and forward through time, and it combines these images, which is a drawing of a photograph in a different position, and the sequence in terms of the history is not straightforward, a little bit like memory. It's this collage of history and time and moment, and the book is clearly intended to do that. It kind of explodes from the center and moves out in these tangents. And I think photographs in themselves, it's almost insufficient, because your photographs are not attempting to prescribe or contain a particular moment. They're not in any way spectacular. They're quite the opposite of that, intentionally. And so it's the combination of these elements which has created this quite febrile space in the book. Yeah,
it's true, and it has a lot to do, about perception, in a way, about when a photograph has this connection with the real, or some sort of, but also in a way it's like memory. Sometimes you have a memory that you don't even remember. That was it a photo? Was it actually? Do you remember that moment, or was it a photo of that moment, or was it somebody who told you something about that moment? And kind of I worked on that idea as well with the construction of this work, that sometimes you don't really know what was what happened really or not. And some images, in some images also, I think that we could also say that they never really happened in real, because for the images I'm using a lot the flash, or I'm somehow staging or working on a very aesthetic
Yeah, that's an important point to make there.
Yeah.
Right? We haven't touched on that there are certain staged elements even. They're not documentary even in that sense. Certain of the elements are...
I mean, like that one. This is a good example because I did it also almost 10 years ago. And the process for this image was actually that I remembered when I was a child that we were playing around with my brother, and sometimes we would open a door and end up like face to face to this dead rabbit hanging, and so I actually staged that image, and I went to get like a rabbit somewhere where you buy to eat it, you know, and I kind of staged it afterwards because it was already long time ago that we did not had rabbits at home anymore. And I made, and this is a good example. And then it became very, like, I mean, very strong reference to paintings. But then, sorry.
C'est pas à propos de Caravage.
Ouais. Oui, there's Le Boeuf.
Oui.
Ouais. And so that's, like, for instance, an example of an image that, if you want, has never existed in real, not only because I staged it, but also because I think that your perception of this moment is, there was not a single moment that I actually perceived that moment with my eyes, because it's also just a flash, so it's like really the light that creates the image, and then no one has actually experienced or never seen that moment, in a way, not even me, if you would speak.
I think there's a thing about flash photography, isn't there, that actually even the photographer doesn't see it because of the explosion of flash. The photographer doesn't see what is being photographed in the way you might through an ordinary light. And
you don't realize that the ambient light is actually very low compared to the flash, so you can interpret it, knowing that you don't have to take it into consideration. So,
and it's a process of abstraction, which all photography is about.
Yeah. But what is interesting is then that relationship to what was a real moment, to what was a sort of a dream of a moment, a memory of a moment, someone who told you about a moment. All those different things are kind of layered together and mixed, and that was the super nice part of the process for me to work with all this kind of material together.
All these layers, Anybody else? I think we're running out of time.
Hi. You were saying at the beginning, when you started like experimenting with photography and you started getting into photography, that you were taking photos without the intention of ever like making it into a book. It was just you like learning how to do it. Like, as like you said, like you started taking them 12 years ago. Like in like more recent photos, would you say that you changed the way you started taking photos compared to the beginning, or did you think like the process was like fairly the same, or I don't know?
That's a good question. It's a good point that I should have mentioned, but I think that there are certain images I would never be able to do anymore. Like, it's
because you know too much.
Yeah, or that just because like a certain way of framing what's there, I would never do that the same way, or not only because I know too much, but also because I know what it means, and I know. Or like for instance, some images I did with a small format camera. I mean, I'm not working with that so much anymore, and so there is the variety of types of images also comes from that there was not only time and something evolving in my practice, but also at the beginning just these different tries with different camera, different medium, and then definitely certain things I could not do, but on the other hand also I think that it's not possible to forget what we have learned, but it's also sometimes possible to let it a little bit aside. But certain things we cannot return to an early, it's like going back to childhood in a way. We can talk about childhood or whatever, but it's not possible anymore to to look at things that way.
Which is what the book is about in general. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. That is all we've got time for, at least for the formal conversation part of the evening. As I said earlier, do stick around, have a glass of wine, spend some time with the book as well. We've got a display copy here. There's another one at the till for you to familiarise yourself with before buying it, which I'm sure you will, and that will be at the till, and I'm sure Anne will be happy to sign them for you. We have a couple more events, photo book events this week. We have Nicola Müllner on Thursday evening, talking about his photo book in Most Tides in Ireland. That will be in our first floor space because he'll be using the projection. There'll be a presentation of the book there, so that's at 7 p.m. on Thursday. And then on Friday morning in our cafe, we have an event at 10 a.m. about food photography. So do come along to both of those. Otherwise, as I said, have a look at all of our books from Photobook Week. Specifically, I think we have a selection of Mac books, and I'm sure Michael would be happy to chat with you about those too. Otherwise, please just join me one more time in giving it up for Michael Mack and Anne Golaz. Thank you.
Thank you.